Okay, let's get it started. What's up, everybody? We are super excited. We are here in LA.
Hey.
And in a fiery situation, but we are making it happen. We are doing this interview with Dan.
Hey.
Dan, you're famous. You want to quickly introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Dan. I'm famous. And I want to quickly introduce myself. I guess I helped co-found MetaMask almost 9 years ago. Is it 9 now? Yeah. So I think I'm coming up on 9. So yeah, it's going to be 10 next year. That'll be, guess I got to celebrate extra big. But we've been, a few different ways I've like contributed to MetaMask's like evolution is trying to make sure that MetaMask stays kind of as much of a facilitator of innovation on the platform as possible without like, constraining the platform into being one particular kind of thing. So one of the big ways we've done that, is, while early on it was very normal for wallets to just like curate a list of tokens that are preferred and sometimes to like take bribes to affect that list. Meanwhile, we were over there specifying methods for sites to propose tokens that get added to the user's wallet, which just completely bypasses us as a gatekeeper for the kinds of assets that are in the wallet. And then we extended that to other protocols too with the Snap system, so you can add basically plugins to the wallet so that you can support any protocol. And now we're making snaps for different kinds of account types. So you'll be able to have like multi-sigs and, zero knowledge, different cryptography for your accounts. And then, for a long time, I was hoping that somebody would come along and make my perfect contract account, but nobody did. And so we finally, after 4337 was landing, we finally were like, okay, the effort has come down enough, and plus AI was making everything easier. So we're like, let's do it. Our vision was bold and ambitious, and technically challenging, but the everything was kind of lined up. So we said, this is the time to do it. So we've made what we call the Gator account, so the MetaMask Delegation toolkit. But it's like a multi-sig that lets you grant permissions, kind of readably, so that other sites or other people or other AI agents can then do things on your behalf without having to bother you with confirmations for every individual thing. And so from my perspective, it's actually the culmination of like research and ideas that we've been having like since very early, like I think as early as 2 years into MetaMask, we started realizing that what we're doing is really building a machine for people to make policy decisions from their computer. And I think that we finally have built an architecture where we can make extremely readable, extremely user consensual, and even open-ended and dynamic permissions from the user's account. And I think this is just going to totally change the way that smart contracts can even get built. Like a lot of things that smart contracts do today, like managing their own delegation, managing their own allowances, which they often do wrong, by the way, like ERC 1155 NFTs, where if you grant one NFT, you grant them all, and then people get, just totally rugged and lose all their Bored Apes in one signature. We're going to make it so whenever you grant a permission, it's actually your wallet enforcing the terms, and you'll have a list of readable terms, and you'll be able to add extra terms. You might be able to subscribe to additional security services that can revoke those. So we're on the verge of, I think, just like shipping the biggest, paradigm improvement in Web3 in terms of just making it more readable and safe for how users connect to other things.
Yeah, that's impressive. And I think we're deeping down a little bit on this. I think like user permission kind of flow, enabling like so many different use cases that we kind of like never see today, right? But let's actually take one step back. Like, so how everything kind of like started. And most important, I know it's like a long story, but also like, I want to also understand like the landscape today, are we actually solving the problem that you saw back in the days for like users and developers? Do you see actually we're going in the right direction on that? And what were the challenges, or what are the challenges even today that you see around kind of users or even around developer tooling for developers?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because everybody comes into crypto for different reasons. And so it is interesting to see the things that brought them into it, especially, and I do think people that get in early sometimes have particularly interesting reasons because they're less likely to have been like financially motivated, right? So like, the reason that Ethereum was interesting to me, but Bitcoin had not really got my attention yet, was because I had been working on some things that were related. I just cared about it actually was like it kind of hit a laundry list of things that had been that I'd wanted. I had done research on trying to build, like, for example, a charity splitter. Like what if you want to donate? What if you want to donate, $50 a month, but you want to be able to list a bunch of charities and then like balance between them. And like my initial research on that was showing like, well, actually, like micropayments from traditional banking is really expensive. Okay, all right, so that's a pain. And I wanted to do micro tipping on Reddit, and again, the size of payments was a problem. The first web app I ever made was a debate system where people would like give pros and cons, and they try to come up with truth, and it raised all these problems with how do you decide what's true in an online debate? And it was like, and I don't think blockchain doesn't actually like solve that directly, but at least it gives you like signed, it gives you the signatures so you can at least verify like the who said what aspect of things. And so when there was suddenly a computer where you could write and I'd also tried to do e-democracy. So like writing what would it take to make an organization where we maybe manage funds, vote on how to use them, and perform and execute on that. And again, like you can't automate how a bank account gets used. That's just not a thing. So the idea that we could have money that's controlled by computers and then write programs for how to manage it just seems like an obvious way to just help us optimize how we do basically anything, And so coming from all that e-democracy, I thought that if we just came up with a slightly better voting system, maybe we would make better organizations, we'd have a more fair society. So I was really into ranked choice voting and different voting algorithms. And going through Web3, I think I've learned that there's actually kind of just trade-offs with every single design. And actually, that was kind of, I think, one of the things I hoped to learn was if we had an ecosystem where we could try lots of kinds of organizations, then we'd get familiar with what the trade-offs are. Maybe we'd get better at making the organizations that make sense for us in different contexts. And I think we've actually done that. I think if one of my favorite things that's come out of Web3 is there is now like a scene of people who have like, they're into DAOs, and they're like, they know what it's, they participate in forums, they discuss proposals, they fund real things, they make stuff happen. And that's, to me, that's kind of like the pinnacle of what we've done so far. It's really a much smaller community than, I think it has the potential to become, and those people endure friction that nobody should have to endure. And and some of them might feel like it's, when you hit friction, you blame whatever software you're using. It's like all of our responsibility as builders of the stack to like smooth out whatever parts we can. And sometimes we can sand off a little superficial friction, and sometimes we get the chance to address really deep fundamental problems. And so I think that where we're at now, we've played around a little bit. We've learned a lot of lessons. And some of those lessons are that like the tools we've been using have really hit certain limits of how far we can move within them. And so I think it's really time. Some people say it's like, oh, is it infrastructure season or app season? I think these are actually, they're always kind of married to each other. Like new technologies always enable new things that are possible. And, if you're not building new things, when you make new things possible, you might be wasting opportunities. But it always comes together. And so I believe a lot in us investing in infrastructure that we see as like high potential. And so, I think we're on the verge of making a new kind of era more usable.
Yeah, that's super exciting. What are, you spoke about kind of like lesson learned, but what are, during all this kind of like time that you've been around, like what are the EIPs that you're most proud of, that you will say like they really shaped our industry today?
I guess that I've been a part of, or just
No, in general. In general.
Oh, well, I mean, like they all, one of the cool things about intercompatible open software is that people are building on each other's stuff. So at a rough glance, I would almost just say like the deepest ones, the ones that were earliest that became foundational were important. And everyone who chose to reuse a pattern and make it so their app could integrate other apps, those were important too, because they're the things that tied things together. So by being ERC20, that's did part of it. I'm happy. One of my favorite early EIPs that I wrote was ERC 173, which is the ownable standard. So every contract that's ownable, which is pretty much every many tokens that are mintable, many multi-sigs have an owner, things like that. In a way, the ownable contract, it was like the first NFT because it's a contract that you own, and you can reassign the owner to someone else. And it was just that, it was an easy thing to identify sometimes. And a contract has some things that can be done that you want one person to be able to do. It's a very rudimentary kind of authorization system, but it's a nice low layer. You're like it's kind of your root control, and then you kind of want extra layers of control on top of that, right? And I think that's what we've started doing with the delegation system. But I mean, all of them.
There's so many. I know. There's so many.
But then the coming up one that we're really excited about is the EIP 7002 and ERC 7715. Those are the upcoming ones that we think in combination are going to be massive unlocks.
I think we should dive deep into it.
You're asking one so far. I mean, everything that's used is pretty much valuable. And you can almost just by usage see easily what is most valuable.
And speaking so specifically now, deep in dive on this work stream, I mean, wallet specific, right? Like every time that people hear me, I'm always like a big fan, around permissionless innovation, extensibility. There is no specific wallet that will fit everything. I think we will have more and more customized journey around different kind of user needs. But what is your kind of like perception specifically around wallets? Like, what are the things that we need to still solve, and what are the things that you think we are doing well today in terms of like, kind of like user needs? Because I think like, we definitely came a long way. I think like, your MetaMask has been always the door of kind of like, everything Web3, right? And we're also kind of like, being in this position as also being a big also responsibilities. But in the same time, also like, I want to ask you like, what are the things that you see that kind of like the users are shaping up that they want more? And what are the things that you think that we're doing well in general?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're at a funny moment in history where like we got enough experience that I think the number of things that we think we've really done right are actually the tiny minority of things. And we are now, we've been working on a much bigger picture of what really needs to be there. And so what have we done right? I think user custodial key management and portable keys, and the fact that you can choose your own data provider and it can be anyone, and the ability to connect to a website, and the fact that you now have a way to kind of mediate the way that you cryptographically interact with unknown entities. Those are all right. Those are all the big broad strokes. They're right. We were not sure, okay, well, when something asks you, when they propose something to you, what do they propose? The naive answer and the obvious first answer was send transaction. We just copied it from Geth. We're like, okay, well, send transaction is a method, so we will support that, and we will make it as readable to a person as it can be. But the truth is that the EVM was not built for calls to send transaction to be readable. They just weren't. It wasn't a design decision that like this function call should result in a human readable output, that it results in a user-informed decision. So that's been the big meaty unknown that I think that so far no one has succeeded to solve. Is once that site suggests something to you, when they need something with you, when they start making a deal with you, do you know what the hell you're doing? And we've come a long way. I think people had like a wave of like simulations kind of solved things. But I think they were a weaker solution than they could have been. It still means that you're like reviewing individual like binary things. They don't work on contracts that are unknown or that are not on chain yet, and it requires a whole bunch of external infrastructure, and they can get gamed, and fishers have already gamed them, and so they can make an output look like it will happen, and then front run the transaction and make something else happen. And the more people lean on this for security, the less it will actually work for security, because the more the fishers will take advantage of it. And so I think what is missing is a paradigm for reasoning about how you make agreements with websites or other people digitally in a way that where you are in control of your side of the negotiation, right? That's what you want. You play a game, you hold your cards. You decide when you play a card. You decide what you do with it. You're playing Magic, and are you tapping it or whatever? It's like you control your moves, right? And if you don't even the way crypto is today, it's like you have a key, and then It's like you don't even get moves. You get blobs of data, and then you're like, is that the move I want to make? It's very unfortunate. So it's a huge missing part, but it's not like a trivial part. This is the question of, can you understand what you're doing on a computer? This is the question, and computers are so powerful,
of course,
and yet most computers are very vulnerable, right? There's two kinds of computers today. There's computers that are just super vulnerable. Every time you run a program, you could be getting hacked. And then there's ones that are just so locked down that every piece of software is in its own sandbox. It just feels like, that the app experience. It's like, okay, well, I've certainly got fun individual games, but do I have an ecosystem of things that can interoperate in interesting ways? That's the thing that sucks. It's like, that's why we hate deep linking in iOS. It's like, that's how iOS lets us intercommunicate. And in a permissionless ecosystem, it's all about the interconnections. And if the interconnection experience sucks, well, then we're gonna like blame each other and be like, why does the UX suck?
Of course.
It's like, well, the platform was literally designed to like basically pit us against each other, right? And pay the 30% tax. And so I really think that the shape of the platform sometimes forces things in this sort of regimented. We're all flat, just under the platform, but that's not how the blockchain works. In the blockchain, we're all just accountants. We're all publishing contracts, and we can connect however we want. And we deserve computers that work that way too.
And kind of we deserve as user to be kind of like in charge. Like revoking access as we want, kind of like giving access as we want. And I think I was always super excited when, like we came out with like revoking access. We can actually like finally really be in charge of like what we're doing. I think mostly of the user, even when you interact with browsers, how many connection you never revoke any access to?
Oh yeah. And browsers are constantly leaking data that you maybe would have never given away, right? Like it knows every time you scroll the mouse wheel, every time you click, every time you write something in the box and then delete it, it could be getting sent up to a server. You don't even know. And it's so creepy how browsers actually work. And yet they're probably the best cross-platform computing operating system in the world.
Yeah, but now, like, I mean, right now we understand all this, right? Like, and usability is a big kind of like part of the journey, right? We see like, wallets spinning out like good usability, good traction. But I mean, one things that also like I want to ask you, like, what's really the future of wallets? What are kind of the vertical that we need to go in order to say, okay, this is how we satisfy and we have this great user experience. You touch on different things. I really like the delegation side, the permission side. I really like the fact that the users is in charge. So meaning like you can actually revoke access. You can actually really feel that you're owning your own data and actions. But in general, like what are the verticals that you think like that kind of like, what is this future of the wallets look like?
Yeah. So, because when you say verticals, it's like you're talking about like specific markets or uses or applications.
Maybe I like for example, like the vertical of like, I don't know, UX. Where is the future of wallets around UX? Where is the future of wallets around? Could be like kind of like onboarding methods. Even like things about kind of like consuming wealth, like off-ramping, all this kind of like side. And I think it's definitely like is a big the wallet itself play a big role, right? That's why like it's also like a big responsibility. Like that's why I'm trying to also understand like what in a nutshell you think is the future of wallets, right?
I think people have a pretty good, like it's almost easy to see intuitively for most people what they want out of a wallet. It's like you want it to be easy. You want to know what the heck's happening. You want it to let you hold all the and trade all the things that you care about. Which, by the way, is a very hard problem when we're talking about protocols that are coming out every single day, right? So I would actually say that because people want it to support any protocol, it has to itself be permissionless. Like I would argue the wallet needs to be permissionless, even if it doesn't feel like that. Well, the fact that the user wants to be able to hold anything means that the wallet needs to actually be an open-ended computing platform. And then they want to be able to have good security when they need it. They don't want it to be hard. They want it to just work, but it needs to be dynamic and configurable. It should feel like the best security in the world. You should have two-factor, or if you're a very high security person, you should be able to compose security models that heck rival the very best things. You should be able to arrange your security model to mimic the security model of the federal government. If you like, as a joke, you should be able to clone the federal government and then do some updates.
Yeah, of course, of course, yeah.
And then lastly, the point that I kind of keep hitting is the things that you have and the things you do with them should all be readable and understandable. So just the coherence of the whole thing is, I think, that's something that's largely missing. So when we say that wallets have come a long way with usability, it's usually on a subset of uses. It's like, well, they've gotten really good at taking tokens and swapping between them, or like at most at like, it may be minting them, but like usually very narrow band of kinds of speculation. And meanwhile, we know there's a lot of value to DAOs, and there's a lot of value to like minting art also, or to managing a shared fund, or I think that, like, ideally, if this is the way we manage money, then it kind of has to be as expressive and open-ended as the ways that people make agreements with each other.
100%.
So it's like, it has to be easy and simple and just work, and also be perfectly open-ended and able to express any agreement or policy that a person would want to engage in.
100%. I really agree on that, and I think also, the usability, the seamless to do and perform action, the way that we are also interacting on chain, I think, like it will definitely like be easier and easier. And I think, so what are the things, I mean, we have been cooking in the past month, but what specifically you're kind of like working on and you are excited about? I know you kind of like outer the EIP, but like what are the things that you're working on right now?
Yeah, so we've been working on a smart contract account we call it the Gator, and it's, I think, the best smart contract account in all of blockchain. And it lets you, have a multi-sig with social recovery like any smart contract account does, but you can also assign subdelegates for any permission you want. And it's got an open-ended permission system. And so this can be used both by, in a way like a DAO, where you could have like subcommittees or subdelegates, but it can also be used at a personal level, where this allows you to sign into websites where you don't have to keep having round trip confirmations. You just grant permissions the site needs, and now just use the site like it was just any other website. So, and granting these permissions are instant and free, like they don't require transactions. And so you don't have to worry about transaction fees or transaction waiting time. You grant permissions to sites. The sites can manage that stuff on the back end. I think the pattern will probably be that sites relay transactions and kind of cover their gas out of the permissions you're giving them. And these permissions can be attenuated. The users can customize them if they want, and to get really get their hands dirty. But ultimately, it's a model for using Web3 where we get out of your way more, and we let you do more things that are easy to reason about, understand. And so you should be able to browse the web, even on behalf of your DAO, and like, interact with the dApp, click a button, turn it into a proposal to your DAO, even if it requires a hardware wallet from someone else, right? So we could have many layers of composition of smart contract accounts that collapses to simple, coherent, just plain readable permissions.
Yeah, that's super interesting. I mean, you touched on the DAO, but what are the other kind of like use case that you are like excited about? Because I really see always like, DIDs and kind of like, stuff like, guardians, like the fact that you actually can delegate actions and can trigger also like action back. There is so many things. Think about also like, loans specifically to actually like direct person-to-person loans, and automatically you can actually like get something in return. NFT loans, all these kind of like the DID is also like a great example. Like, what are the use cases? Like,
it's a huge thing. It's like some things are so general purpose that actually it's like the right answer is like anything. And so I guess we can speculate what the most valuable things are. We know like streaming payments are cool. One thing this does is, since the permissions are always, they actually can be signed into little chains of permissions. And so you can have a money stream that you can then stream it. You can split the stream, and no transactions on chain, and so no fees. But so you can have these streams where you could have an arbitrarily deep money stream, and people only sign transactions when they need to pull down the stream, and you can have these like continuous streams. And eventually, I hope we can form these like circuits and build more like self-reinforcing economies out of them. But it's a tool for, you can build financial support networks. I actually think a low-key, super powerful use case will be like I would like to make a social norm out of like offering like just a little bit of like in case you ever need it money to your friends. Like so your MetaMask has like, like part of your portfolio is actually your like social support network. And like that could be honestly like an alternative to some kinds of insurance, where you're like, okay, well, living in California, you may not be able to get fire insurance anymore, but you might have like a bunch of friends that if you ever need to relocate, have on-demand resources available to you, and yeah, that's another fun one. Obviously AI agents. Everybody's into AI agents right now.
Elephant in the room.
Right. And like, so AI agents, the usual norm thing that people are doing today is they just like give keys to the agent, they put funds into those keys, and now the agents just have those funds. And you're basically like, well, that account is that agent's now. Let's, cross our fingers and hope for the best. And then meanwhile, the people speculate like, what will it look like when agents work with other agents and you have agent swarms, right? I think that our delegation framework is actually an answer to both of these things. Rather than put funds into an agent's hands, granting an agent some permissions to act on your behalf is a way where you can actually have many agents doing things potentially on your behalf. Because some things that are done, it's not active. It's not always a transaction. Some things are capabilities of opportunity. So you might have a bunch of funds that are available. Like, if you're on the search for a special thing, like one of my old jokes was like, what if I want to find a piece of a UFO? I'll have a little fund, and I don't want to lock funds into my UFO fund, but from my main, savings, I could issue a bounty. Like, if you can find a fragment of a UFO that will get authenticated by this person, then you can withdraw these funds, let's say. And you got to bring it down to the lab or something. But that's an allowance. That's a permission that doesn't make sense to lock funds into each agent. You're going to post your life savings for each agent that you want to. No, it's a bounty. It's like, so you should be able to post many instances of the same offer to many sub-agents. And those sub-agents could then extend their offer to sub-agents they interact with. And so that multi-hop incentivization thing is also really valuable because you might only want to extend this offer to people you would trust to be honest about it. For example, and because now you're limiting the distribution of the offer, and those sub-agents can now redelegate the permission and they can add their own commission on top. And so you can create this construct we've started calling incentive trees, where people who have incentives can then actually get paid not for finding the thing, not for making the deal, but for doing the networking that then eventually enables the deal's completion. So I think that that's also got a lot of implications for things like referral marketing for like influencers. Like one of the weirdest things for influencers is like when they like a good influencer is being honest about their life and is like trying lots of things and then sharing and in a way that like enriches the lives of their audience. So and product recommendations is part of that, So one of the things though is when you see a product recommendation from an influencer, you're always like, did they get paid to say that? Now, but if the referral fee was transparent, and you could just have a referral fee for anything, you can just slap it on anything, then as an influencer, you would always choose to put the referral fee on the thing you would actually want to recommend. Right. So then now you solve the problem of like, well, he got bribed by the bad one. It's like, well, no, he can choose to bribe himself with whichever one he wants because he's adding the fee on his price to his audience. And so I think there's some potential of using this tool in a way to compensate people for bringing positive value to their audience, even in terms of recommendations. And I think that could be useful also for distributing, the purchase opportunities for new products. So if you're building a hardware product, but you've got limited capacity, who are you going to sell it to? You might issue the initial sell offers to your close friends. And the truth is, you wouldn't mind if they brought extra customers to you, right? So having a built-in system for compensating people for bringing in the boundary between customer and employee starts to blur, right? And I think that some of the best things in Web3 are things where you blur the line between customer and employee, where it's like you join this community. You're not just and it's not because you like bought a token necessarily. And actually, I think there's like a big thing. It's like a mistake people sometimes make. It's like, oh, if I bought that NFT, am I now part of a community? It's like, I don't know. If you can buy the membership, I don't know if it's such an exclusive club, you know. But if it's something that you're granted, and it's totally up to you whether or not you use it, or and you would only share it if you really believed in it. Like now you're actually leveraging your real reputation, your real social network to bring real value and potentially actual money compensation in exchange for it.
Cool. That's so cool. I mean, you literally listed, this is super useful because you literally listed like 10 plus use case that actually builder hearing us, maybe 3, 4, right? Let's say that. But we can come up with more, right?
Yeah,
It's
for
literally infinite. But for people building at home, building and contributing, I just want to ask you, because you're also been around for a long time. You saw also like how communities and the ecosystem is evolving. And I'm always like, asking myself how we can create better kind of like ecosystem incentives. I really like the retroactive funding. I really like, but how, what is your opinion? Like, what are the things that we can do better, or like, what are the things that we should do if we want to actually have a good and healthy and resilient community in terms of kind of like sustainability too, right? Is retroactive funding the solution? Like, how do you think like the methods that even maybe you saw in the past that kind of like are not really used anymore, but how we can kind of like sustain and build a stronger, could be EVM, but also non-EVM community, right? Because right now I feel like we're also building like different islands. Developers are going to different islands. They are Rust-based, they're non-Rust-based. Like, we definitely need more like kind of like cross-chain. But I think like where it sits, like where we're speaking about incentives and building a vibrant ecosystem and strong community, especially developer communities, is definitely like, is not kind of like vertical focused. It's about the method, right? I think retroactive funding was a great, is a great actually like incentive model. But what are the things that you wish like we should do or we could do in the future to actually build a much stronger and resilient community?
Yeah. And I have seen a few of them over time. I think the first one I got to try was the original Gitcoin. We would post bounties on a GitHub, and then people would post pull request and then ask for the bounty. And this would create a weird situation sometimes where you'd say, oh, this isn't up to our part. And then they say like, well, what do you mean? It did exactly to the letter of what you said. And you didn't have an adjudication process. And so you'd be in a weird situation. So in that situation, you kind of, I think you started to see the problem with funding at different times, right? It's like, because when you're making an exchange, somebody always is moving first, even if it's very close to the same time. Someone gives first. So either the bounty hunter gave before you gave the bounty, or the retroactive airdrop, or you paid an employee before they contributed, right? And every time that happens, there's a little bit more ambiguity. So I think there's a lot of opportunity for having like more continuous, more like explicit agreements like that. So streaming payments are a good example of that, right? Like if your employment was streaming and continuous, and then the second you weren't, you didn't think you were getting compensated sufficiently, you could cut that, or the second they didn't like it, you could renegotiate that. That would be one tool for that kind of thing. I would love to see more kind of DAOs as cooperatives. So like today, a lot of DAOs are like people who kind of throw in funds and then they maybe choose how to vote on how to use them, or maybe they got airdropped funds and they decide how to use these funds. But I'd like to see more usage of like equity type tokens, like tokens as compensation for contribution, so that like revenue is used to distribute to the people who have helped out. And if you were really doing a good job of like measuring contribution and just accurately, then you'd have that thing where like it doesn't matter so much if you're like constantly working on that DAO or something. You don't feel like you're breathing down your neck. You're not getting like scrutinized as much. You could contribute to a bunch of them at once. If this is just kind of your community, you got your neighborhood one, you got your like main one. Maybe you have your main job, whatever. But like through many different kinds of interactions and contributions, you might cultivate lots of different relationships. So I think retroactive funding, bounties, those are like nice tools in the toolbox, but without like some kind of like reciprocal assurances, it can be a little hard to decide who goes first. I also do think that like if you have some of those delegations I was describing where you might say like, I could give you a delegation that says, hey, if you want to contribute, this is a bond on our payouts. So here's like, here's a $1,000 bond. Like, so if you want to make any code contributions to this repo, okay, that you think are worth that much, you can take it, but also we'll try to pay you out. And so now what you've got a guarantee up to that much. So if you're concerned about how we might compensate a bounty, then now we've got to trust. Now maybe I don't trust you directly though, but we've got a mutual friend who is willing to extend that bond to you. So because these permissions are multiple hop, we can now start using these bonds as like a form of vouching for contributors in a way that like actually works multiple hops. So now you get like insurable bounties where people don't have that weird situation where they feel like they did a good job but they're not getting paid or something. And so I would love to, I'd love to facilitate like bounties where you have guarantees. And bounties are a lot like a retroactive token allowance. And I think one of the worst things with them though is they facilitate this airdrop hunting kind of mentality where people are like, because there might be tokens, I'm gonna behave a little weird even though it's like not producing any real value. And so then people are like, and then people also feel like they're in an obligated position. You try to create a sense of obligation for airdrop on other projects and stuff, rather than just having like a more direct conversation about like value creation and compensation. So I think tools like that can facilitate more explicit expectations. I think that's the kind of thing that starts to unlock more like, unreserved collaboration. And that's what I would like to see.
Nice. I mean, this is super cool. We are almost at time. Super quick, Dan. Like, anything that you want to say could be work related, no work related, like that you're excited about. Denver is coming up. What are the things like Pectra? Is on his way. What are things?
I guess you should stay frosty.
Stay frosty. There you are. There you are. Awesome.
Cool.
Awesome.
We've got some cool things to share around Denver, probably.
Awesome. Okay, sounds good. Thank you so much, Dan.
Right on.
First one.
Hey,
awesome.
great to see you.
Cheers, guys. Cheers, guys. Bye.
Thanks, Francesco.
Oh, this is good.